My concern was in playing him, he's kind of a dick. He kind of goes through life just living, floating above everything, and everybody in his wake just gets damaged along the way. You gotta still root for the guy who actually is causing all the problems. And that required some finessing.
If you need a couple of days to clear your head, I'll tell the studio.
Tell them that I'm joining Daisy and her friends at a jazz festival in Paris, and then we are catching a train to Italy.
And you're tracking her through her friend's mother's credit card.
It's my last chance to spend time with her before she's gone forever.
Those are great, by the way.
Yeah, they are good. They're
Little
from
Tom
Italy.
Ford
They're
or-
old. No, they're from the 70s, and I have
course
two
they are.
frames, and I found them, and I dropped this one in Lake Como. And a guy who worked at the hotel put on a scuba suit and went out and found them at the bottom of the lake.
Oh my God, it's good to be George Clooney.
Yeah, it was
oh
nice.
my God.
What a crack-up.
Well, welcome to Skip Intro.
Well, thank you very much.
It's great to have you in the studio.
great to see
Thank
you.
you for making the time.
Well, I'm happy to be here.
And I just have to say, I said this to you earlier, but
Yes.
it's so good to see you in LA.
You know, I still have such great friends here and such a, you know, I was here for 40 years. So it's a real huge part of my life, you know, and
Yeah.
I miss it all the time.
Yeah, we miss you. I go on that Fryman Canyon hike, and it's just like, hi, George, not George.
Not
How
my
are
house
ya?
anymore.
But it was. It
It
was a
was.
great house.
For 30 years.
But it's great to see you. And regardless of where you are, you're still our George Clooney. So
That's
that
right.
does not matter.
That's right. Keep that in mind.
I was excited, obviously. I love this film.
Yeah.
And I was excited for you coming on the show from like Jump when I saw it. So it's been a long time coming. But when I'm looking at it, it's like you've got 100 acting credits, 50 producer credits, endless nominations, numerous awards, 2 Oscars.
Yep.
You're an incredible humanitarian. You're also a husband, and you also have twins.
I have
Like,
twins.
fuck.
That's a lot. I know. I'm the Tony Randall of my generation. I've started late.
Yeah, but it's great.
We're having the time of our lives.
Yeah.
I'm back on I grew up in Kentucky on a farm, and I vowed to never be back on a farm no matter what. And now I'm on a farm with a tractor and, you know, the kids running around. They're having a really good growing up there. You know, there are laws about taking pictures of kids in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
They're able to spend their days and nights like normal kids. And I wasn't sure that's what they would get here, quite
Yeah.
honestly. You know, I couldn't have done this when I was 35 years old or 40 years old because I would have had to have been in LA and chased work.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm 64 and it's a lot easier to do. And so it's been, you know, we were really enjoying giving our kids a chance, which ultimately I feel like is your number one responsibility.
Yeah. How many languages do they speak?
They speak, 3 fluently, English, Italian, and French. Guess who doesn't speak Italian and French? Yeah, right here.
And a little bit of English. Yeah, that's going to be problematic as they get older.
It's already problematic. They already
Yeah.
do stuff like they'll be like, hey, Papa's a stronzo, eh? And I'm like, what? What'd you say? Whenever they want to get away with something, they start speaking French in front of me.
And of course, Amal speaks like,
She speaks all of it.
every language.
They got those genes from their mother, not from me.
thank God.
Yeah, thank God.
So you talk about Kentucky a lot. Then you had your 40 years in LA where everything happened. Basically, you went through all of the highs and the lows
Sure.
and the super fame. If there was one part about your life that, like, if you were to make a movie of your life, what is the one part that's most important to you?
I don't know about most important because I would certainly categorize that since I met my wife. That's been the most important part for me. I've never been happier. I have, a beautiful, smart partner in life that I'm very proud to call my wife, and the kids who've come around since it. So that would be certainly the most important part. I think the interesting parts are early acting. In the movie, we have, Billy Crudup plays a young actor who was the best actor in acting class. And I was in this acting class, and there were a couple actors who were the best actors in class, and they were lousy auditioners, you know. And the one thing you kind of learned through all of that was, you were developing a thicker skin through all that. You know, you did maybe 60 or 70 auditions. And I remember I was dating a girl at an agency that I finally got into an agency. I'd done a play and I got an agent. And I was dating the secretary. And you used to have, at casting, was breakdowns. And it would be a breakdown of a character for a show or something. And my agents were never getting me in on it. But I would call the studio or the network and pretend to be a casting director and get myself auditions, con my way into the room, lie about my credits because there was no computers. You couldn't
Right, you
follow.
could.
I remember lying once with a casting director named Barbara Clayman. I lied about being in a movie called Cat People because I figured nobody really saw it. And she was like, I cast that movie. So it was all kind of conning your way into things and blagging your way into it. And it was a really exciting time to try to notch out a career with no thoughts that it was ever going to work out, and the excitement of all of that. Every audition that you got a call back was incredibly exciting. And every time you did, it was deeply depressing. And so there was a really exciting, like early 80s in LA. It was fun.
Right. No social media, no pay phones,
No, it's
stick
funny,
shift cars still. Yeah.
I talked to actors at the Screen Actors Guild, And I said, I'm a director a lot of the time, and I'll sit on the couch and I'll have two actresses that I'm considering for a role. And the studio will come in and say, well, this actress has on Instagram this many followers, so you should hire her. And they put a lot of pressure on you for that. Networks do it. And I tell everybody, get off of it. Get off of it. If you're not on it, you have nothing to compare to. It, of course, makes no difference at all in the selling of the project, but it is a part of a thing where they go, well, let's go for the most chance of eyeballs, which of course isn't accurate. And so I'm so glad that I grew up came of age here at a time where there was no social media, none of that.
I love that scene. Obviously, all the stuff about the young actors. You know that person. Billy knows that
Sure.
person. When I talked to him about it, like you just said, you probably weren't the best in your acting class, but you could audition and they didn't, or it's just a numbers game or whatever. But I love this scene from the acting coach. He says, if you're lucky enough to act professionally, you'll be lying for a living. The better you lie, the more truthful you'll seem.
Yeah.
And the more successful you'll be.
Yeah. Well, acting is lying, right?
Yeah.
You're pretending to be something you're not.
Yeah.
But it's a funny thing about that because you don't really have any control over success or fame. Most of it, 90% of it's luck. It doesn't matter about your skill is important. You have to create luck. Jack Nicklaus famously sank a 60-foot putt, and the guy said lucky putt, and he goes, yeah, the more I practice, the luckier I get. That's absolutely true about acting. You have to create that luck, but you still have to hit that moment. I did 13 pilots, and the last one, the 13th, was ER. And I never had to do another one. And I had a lot of moments. I was in the pilot of the first series of Roseanne,
Yeah.
And it was a massive hit, but I was really the sixth or seventh banana on the show, and it wasn't going to work out. So I'd been on hit shows, and I'd been on huge flops, but none of it worked. And then right place, right time with ER. And suddenly everything changed, and I had a career.
How about when Billy's reading that menu?
The menu.
And he had said he was so nervous about it. He tells a really good story about trying to get to that moment, and he had to do it multiple times. I mean, what was that like for you to watch him do that?
Well, in fairness, what you see is the first take. He did it great the first time.
Wow.
I was talking to him because, I've known him a long time, and I've been such a fan of his, and I really adore the guy. And I said, what the hell are you going to do, dude? I mean, because he's not a method actor.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't know. And I'm like, shit. And we rehearsed, but he didn't really do it. And then the very first take, first scene, tears come pouring down his face. And he does it. And by the way, when we screened it at the New York Film Festival, the first big American audience, we'd done it in Venice, but he got a standing ovation. It's just spectacular. And it was fun to be an audience member in the scene, because he was acting up a storm and I got to just sit there and watch him. It's so fun when you see someone doing something at the highest level. It doesn't always happen. And so when you get to see it, you're like, wow, this is really exciting,
Well, I have to say, that's kind of how I felt watching you in this film. I've always been, a fan of yours since ER, and just personally, professionally.
We've known each other a long time.
We've known each other a long time. And who you are in the world is someone I deeply respect, and I'm always enjoy seeing you in the flesh and 20 feet high on a screen or on a smaller screen in my living room.
Exactly.
Regardless of the age. But I will say there's something about Jake Kelly, and you said this, I think, in New York or one of the Q&As about when Noah and Emily Mortimer said that they wrote this with you in mind, and you were very funny because you're like, well, there's about 3 people in the world that could play
the part,
it.
yeah.
So I'm glad that I wanted to do it because it's true. You have to play this larger than life movie star. And it's obviously a combination of fame and someone that is instantly recognizable.
Yeah.
And the parallels are beautiful, but it's so interesting to me because it explores that gap. And Noah talks about this, about who we are and who we present ourselves to be in the world. And I do that. Everyone does that.
Everybody does it, sure.
And what did it mean for you to play this part at this point in your life?
Well, it's funny. Some people will look at it and say, well, I was playing myself. And I didn't read it that way at all, because I don't live and haven't lived with regret, which this guy does. Regret's a really toxic thing. The older you get, the worse it gets. It's a real damaging element to your soul. And I don't have that. At every crossroad where it was time to take a risk or not, I took the risk. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. But you can live with failure. You can't live with regret. And so when I read the script and all the people around him that work for him are leaving him. Well, I have been working with the same people for, 30 years or more. All of his friends are sort of gone. My friends I'm still very close to. His family can't stand him. And luckily I have a family that, at least at 8, they still dig me. And my beautiful, fantastic wife and partners. So, I feel like when I read it, I didn't read it as if this was something of me playing myself, although they were, obviously, he was writing in these parallels, like the guys from Kentucky, and they did a few things like that. My concern was, in playing him, was he's kind of a dick. He's kind of Frankenstein. You know how Frankenstein really didn't mean to hurt the little girl. He just threw her in the river.
Right.
And he kind of goes through life just living, floating above everything, and everybody in his wake just gets damaged along the way. And so my concern and my conversations with Noah were, if the audience is going to take a ride on this, take a journey on this, you got to still root for the guy who actually is causing all the problems. And that required some finessing along the way. And Noah's such a wonderful director, and he just sort of opened it up to help me get through all of that. He's just a great guy.
Yeah, no, he's great. How did you feel being a little bit of the odd man out? I mean, Adam had worked with him before. Laura is practically an honorary member of the family.
Well, I met him when he had Squid and the Whale and I had Good Night and Good Luck, and we were doing the circuit together. And at the time I said, give an actor a gig. And he said, absolutely. And that was 20 years ago. It took him a long time. But I also briefly worked with him on Fantastic Mr. Fox. He was one of the writers.
Of course.
So I had a little bit of a history with him. But this was just different. This was that thing where when you read the script, you go, oh. And, I know Adam pretty well. We used to play basketball together and stuff, and we're friends. And I know what he's capable of as a dramatic actor as well as a comedic actor. And this is when he gets to do both. And I thought this is going to be a really exciting, fun experience for all of us. It's also a road show. We get to go in London, and we were in LA, and we were in Pienza, Italy. And, Laura Dern and I did our first movie together in 1984.
Yeah, she talked about that. She said you took her to her first premiere or something.
Yeah. After that movie, it didn't come out for 40 years. I went off and I ended up being like the 7th banana on The Facts of Life. The other 2 actors who were in that movie, Grizzly 2, were Laura Dern and Charlie Sheen. And Charlie got Platoon and Laura got Mask. And they were off and running.
Yeah.
And I was older than them and kind of like her big brother. But she was so kind that she kept bringing me to like the premieres of movies. I was sort of her chaperone, like her older brother. And I loved being there. And she kind of introduced me to the other side of, I was on the auditioning, scrambling side of acting. And she kind of introduced me to the star side. And she did it with grace and beauty, and she's been a dear friend for 40-some years.
Amazing. When did you first meet Adam? Was it all through like pickup games or?
First time I met him was when I hosted Saturday Night Live in 96, I think, 95, 96. We started playing ball together. He's a good basketball player. And then, he was in Lake Como shooting a movie with Jen Aniston.
Oh, yeah.
They came over for dinner, and he'd write me a note after he'd see a movie, and he's always been a really sort of generous, sweet guy. And we've always just gotten along. We've always had laughs and had a good time. This was different, obviously, because we really understood what this was. And we understood that the relationship between the two of us is the most important part of it. That's the love story, you know? And we knew that that had to work. And it required a generosity of spirit with Adam, you know, in a way that doesn't always happen. He was, you know, he had to be the guy that works for me. And I crap on him a lot. And he has to kind of take it until he gets to stand up for himself. There was a real beauty in his, in the way he addressed that.
Do you have a favorite Adam Sandler movie?
Yeah, I have a couple. Punch Drunk Love, I loved, because that was the first time he went from goofy to a really proper dramatic actor. I thought he was beautiful in that film and vulnerable and dangerous at times. And so that was my favorite of his films. He's a really instinctive, smart, good actor. And when he gets to do movies like this and Meyerowitz Story before that, in Uncut Gems and films like that. By the way, Meyerowitz Story, he's beautiful in it. He's beautiful in it. He's a wonderful actor. And he's also just a gentle soul. He's really a great guy to be around. You know, there's some of those guys that you hope they're the person that they seem like they are. And he's one of those guys who proves that to be true, you know?
He is. He's like, everyone's like, Adam. He walks around, his
Hey,
sweats.
man, how you doing?
Yeah.
But I made it for all of the press we're doing. I made him put on a suit.
Yeah,
Have you
how'd
seen
that go?
He's wearing a suit everywhere we go. I said, dress up. We're going to the London Film Festival. You're not going to wear shorts. You can put on a tuxedo and you're going to show. And he does.
You're probably the only person that's been able for him to do that. Not even his wife, I think.
And I said, we're not going to call you Sandman. We're not going to, there's no more goofing around. He's been really funny about it. Now he blames me for everything. I think he really loved working with Noah. I think he loved doing this film. And why not? I mean, it's at 64, you know, I'm 64, and there's this thing about, it's very hard to find parts like these. It's just the simple truth of it. So, you know, when you get them, you jump.
The young girl that plays one of your daughters, Daisy, Grace Edwards, by the way, what a great discovery she is.
It'll be so lonely here without you.
No, it won't. You're never alone.
Really? I think I'm always alone. Thanks a lot. You are.
Yeah, that's so perfect. Those perfect Hollywood
Yeah.
moments. But the part to me that is really more universal, we pull it out of Hollywood, is just living. You know, as we get to the middle age part, or you look at your life, and
only if you live to be 140.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like where we think about like decisions, regret. Do we give too much to that person, and do we do more things well versus bad? And like, should I have done that? And I didn't do that. Like you said, like living with regret, but. The relationship between Jay and Ron is so special because you realize here's one person that's devoted his life to another.
Yeah.
But that person isn't really the person. It's the idea of this person that's projected on the screen. And people have those people in your life. You happen to be one of the most loyal actors or human beings, I think. You know, you still have the same group around you.
Yeah.
You're just going to age beautifully with all of them.
They're all aging around me quickly.
But talk to me about kind of getting that dynamic with him.
Well, I mean, I have to say, because I think these themes in this movie have nothing to do with fame, you know. They're about every decision that every one of us has to make who has a family, you know.
Yeah.
It's like you're balancing work and family and time. And we never get it completely right. And we always look back as we get older and go, I wish I'd spent more time with the family. You never go, I wish I spent more time working, unless you have a really crappy family. But, you know, the truth of the matter is everybody does the best they can. My parents didn't show up for a lot of stuff I did, but they were working. They had to put food on the table. And that's how it is. And that's how life is for almost everybody. And so Adam and I got to experience this not as Jay Kelly, the movie star, and the manager, but as two guys who spent their life chasing their careers and maybe missing out on the things that really matter and the reason you have a career in the first place. But it's not something unique to our industry. It's something that's completely universal, I think. I don't know anybody in any business that doesn't wish they'd sort of refocused a little bit, but we're never going to get it completely right.
Our family's losing it at home.
It's like a movie where I'm playing myself or watching myself.
I'm sorry, you gotta go again. I didn't hear a word you said.
I said I'm suddenly remembering things. And what is that?
Memory?
Well, yes.
Maybe your memory's trying to tell you something about your present.
How was the physicality of the role? I mean, I know that it's a physical performance. You
I
do
gotta
a lot of
running.
action. You do a lot of running.
Well, it's funny. Noah famously does a lot of takes. And I called him up. I said, I'm begging you. I don't have that many acting choices, help me out. And he's like, okay. But we still did just tons of takes. And that's his method. And once you buy in with somebody, you buy in with them. So like those running through the field scenes, I did 20 or 30 times. And I was like, what are you not getting that you need? Because I'm running 300 yards and I'm 64 years old.
At a clip, too.
And I'm
You're
moving.
sprinting, yeah.
And so he goes, maybe if you could just go a little faster. And I was like, because I was going as fast as I could go. And I got it. And there was a camera, it was a Steadicam shot. It was about waist high. And so I didn't run any faster. I just started pumping my arms faster. And when it was over, he goes, that was much faster. I'm like, yeah. Great. And it looks much faster than the other one. And it was literally just moving my arms faster was the trick. The physicality is fun, though. I'm still an athlete. I still play a lot of sports. So I'm proud that I can still do all of that stuff. But it is still, there is a funny thing that happens. There is still a challenge just because as you get older, the things that you used to do that just came naturally are like, I used to be able to dunk a volleyball all the time. Just jump up straight from below the thing and jump. And when I was directing Boys in the Boat, there were all of these young British 6'5" handsome actors, and they were out playing basketball. They don't know how to play basketball; they're Brits, but they could dunk because they were tall. And I was like, dude, now let me show you how to dunk. And they're like, you can't dunk. Give me that ball. And I went up to dunk, and to say that I didn't come near dunking, I didn't even touch the net. Mm-hmm. And I fell back on my ass, on my back, and they all laughed. And it was absolute shock, like shock that I couldn't get up. I really do think maybe the first marker of aging is vertical jump.
And also, I'd be so like, what are you doing that for? Haven't you had like back issues and famously like...
You never, ever stop
Yeah.
wanting to be a jock.
Well, you would have been like, if you had your sliding doors moment.
I would have been
Okay.
a professional baseball player.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's it.
In fact,
what would you have?
I was a center fielder.
Center fielder,
I was
okay.
just back in Cincinnati, Ohio 2 weeks ago, and the owner of the Cincinnati Reds came out, and they read my scouting report, which was hysterical, from 1978. Everybody was laughing. It was like, he's got no arm, he's got decent speed, he can catch, but and it
Great
was
smile, but yeah.
it was really like humiliating. And then he gave me a contract for one day as a Cincinnati Red. So I got to be a Cincinnati Red for one day, and they made the playoffs this year. So I feel like I helped them.
That's amazing.
So that was really, it's stupid, but it was very sweet and it was very fun.
Wow. Well, I want to ask you, like, what still challenges you now? But obviously, you came off that incredible Broadway run of
That was a
having to know
challenge.
12 endless pages of dialogue and
Yeah.
whatnot.
That was the most challenging thing I've done in a long time. I hadn't done a play in 39 years. I'd never done a Broadway play. And the subject matter of the play and the timing of it lent itself to a lot of people really needing to hear those words. We will not walk in fear one of another. We will be driven by fear into an age of unreason if we dig deep in our history and our doctrine and remember that we are not descended from fearful men. Those are lines that people wanted to hear at that moment. It's a 1,600 seat theater, it's a big theater. For a play as opposed to a musical, it's a huge theater. And it was a lot to take on because everybody in that theater was holding in their chest this feeling that they needed to hear these words of Murrow's. And so it was a big responsibility. And I felt it every night. And we'd have students come in. We gave away 1,000 tickets for students 2 nights in a row. And you'd have kids who come in who knew the speeches. And if I got one word wrong, nope, you got it wrong. So there was a
Kids
real
these days.
kids. There's a lot of pressure on that, and also whether or not I was physically able to or mentally able. When you're 64, one of the big issues that they don't talk to you about is that memory is a big deal, and memory is a big deal. And I was concerned about remembering all those long lines. It was 4 months of sheer panic every night, before I went out. But I was very proud to have done it. I was very proud to have been in that room at that time, at that period of time.
Yeah, no, and you got a Tony nominated for it. And it was
Yeah, that was cool.
Big moment. The hair was its own thing.
People were very angry at my dark hair.
very, very angry about that.
By the way, the funniest thing is you never look older than when you dye your
Yeah.
hair. It's
Seriously.
Like, I've never looked older.
Yeah.
People are like, oh my God, you're old. And I was like,
Well,
dude.
there's a few people that still are committed to it.
Yeah.
In and around, you're like, oh, maybe not. All right. So in Jay Kelly, there's a great mirror scene that Noah does about Jay Kelly. George, Jay Kelly, and you're on there just looking at yourself, saying your name, and then you're seeing yourself and the tribute.
Oh, yeah, that was crazy.
So what part of how did that affect you? Like how
Well,
was seeing yourself and
It's funny, I grab Adam's hand.
Yeah.
That was actually sort of just out of, fear. I didn't know what he was going to do for the tribute. I thought they were going to do some kind of a CGI, a bunch of me in movies clips. And then I thought most of it would just play on my face. And when I'm watching, all of a sudden, there are all these clips of my actual films. It's pretty meta, but it was also very, it threw me off a little bit because you're really literally with an audience sharing 40 years of aging, which I hadn't thought of much. When you don't really, it's like the frog in the water and turning up the heat. You don't really feel it until you see yourself with a mullet, on The Facts of Life and slowly getting into a guy with the long gray beard in Midnight Sky. And watching that transformation is hard on your soul a little bit. And so I remember that the very first take was, I was watching it with everybody else for the first time. And it was, tricky, but it was good. It was helpful because Adam and I knew that we needed to stick that landing of the last scene because it's the last scene in the movie. And if you don't send the audience out giving a damn about the characters, those two characters, then you failed. And that meant you had to actually land the very last scene.
Yeah, it was beautiful. I love that. And I was wondering, I was like, did he know that?
No.
Yeah, and that's such a good Noah-ism.
Sneaky. I found out that all the other actors who had smaller roles, like Billy,
Great casting,
or Josh Hamilton, who plays the shrink, guys like that, they only got the pages for their scenes. He did what Woody Allen used to do. So none of these guys knew what the movie was, which is crazy. I didn't know that until literally we were doing a Q&A a couple of weeks ago. I was like, you didn't read the script?
Actually, I didn't even know that. I wasn't there because I was thinking about Riley Keough, plays your other daughter, who has my favorite line of, how I know you didn't want to see me or spend time with me because you didn't spend time with me. I was like, that's going to be on a T-shirt.
Yeah.
But she was terrific
What
as
a
well.
wonderful actress. And what a gentle soul. Young actors could learn a lot from the way she addresses fame and attention and all those things. She's very shy and very reserved, but she can handle it. She's a grown-up.
All right, I'm going to ask you a couple questions that I ask everybody on this. So, first one is all right. First one's about birth order.
Birth order?
Okay, so we're going to go back to Kentucky.
Okay.
What do you think about your birth order has affected who you are in the world?
Well, I think every parent and every child would make the argument that not being first is helpful because first is when parents are figuring it out and they're panicked that you're going to stop breathing. So I was a year younger than my sister. So I think I had it a little easier in birth order because by the time I came around, my mom was 19 years old, so she was a baby. So I think it was a lot easier for me in birth order because I think they'd worn out all of their panic on my sister, and so I got it a little easier.
And did she resent that at all, that she didn't have any of that? Or
no, because it's not like she didn't get attention or didn't, we're still very close. And I talked to her this morning. My parents were good parents, They had a very hard, we were very poor when we were young, and they had a very hard time of it early on. And, they would both go to work and the town was our babysitter, and they'd come over and make sure you put the lasagna in the oven and stuff like that. Then as my father got more successful, by the time I was about 15 or 16 years old, when everybody's broke, nobody knows that anybody's broke. Yeah. And so, I cut tobacco for a living for $3 an hour, and so did all my friends.
Yeah, everyone was doing the same thing. Okay, so now you have twins.
Yes. My son is 52 seconds older than my daughter, and he reminds her of it constantly.
So do you think there's a dynamic that plays out there?
I don't know. A little bit.
Yeah.
There's also boy-girl
Girl,
dynamics, which are very interesting, you know. My daughter she's like my wife. She follows all the rules. These are the rules. You know, you got to do this, you got to do that. We have to finish. I'll say, okay, you guys get 20 minutes of screen time. And at 20 minutes, she closes the screen and shuts it down on my son. And, you know, and Alexander, my son, will do, you know, he'll try to cheat the system in pretty much any way he possibly can. You know?
What would happen? What would that conversation be like if one of them wanted to go into this business?
They both are kind of showmen. They like to get up and sing and, you know, and do dance routines and stuff. But I think that's just kids in general. And the conversation would be as honest as possible, which is the odds are very slim that it works out. They are. That's how it is. You know, and if it was about nepotism, then Frank Sinatra Jr. would have been the biggest star in the world, you know. You know, it might being someone famous's kid might open some doors, but, you know, they don't keep it open. And I would try to make the argument to them that if they were going to go in it, they have to have thick skin and be prepared to fail. Because if you're not prepared to fail, then you're not going to succeed.
Do you have any irrational fears left now at 64 years old? Anything that
No, not irrational. There are plenty of fears, you know. There's getting old and dying. Fear is a healthy thing. You know, I always worry about people who don't have it. You know, you have to go and like, I was terrified to do the play. But that's why you do it, you know. And so irrational fears, I don't think so. I have a very low heart rate, like crazy low heart rate, low blood pressure. My wife hates it because she'll throw a surprise party for me and all these people will jump out and I'll go, oh, hey guys, how you doing? And she's like, that's it? That's all I get? And so I'm not irrational about things. You know, when I was going into Darfur and South Sudan and the Nuba Mountains and Abyei and all these war zones, and there was lots of dead people around, and we have film of, you know, of bombs being dropped and everybody running, and I'm trying to, you know, maintain my cool. I always had a fairly good sense of calm. You know, I have whatever that is, a low ticker, so I don't have this tendency to be irrational. I usually am pretty calm in situations, so I rely on that to not have too many irrational. I certainly have tons of fears. I mean, people would be idiots if they didn't.
Core memories. And this kind of parallels a little bit of Jay Kelly, right?
Okay.
So, and especially that line, which I can relate to too. All my memories are movies.
Yeah.
It's a great line.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you have a favorite line of the film. I have a few, but.
I love that line. I also like the very last one, where he's like, I'd like another one. I'd like to go again.
Right.
I think everybody has that.
Right.
You
like
know.
to go again.
You know, sometimes because it was really fun, and sometimes because you'd like to do it better.
Yeah, do it better.
And you could interpret it either way. But I do like that a lot about it. So core memories, like what?
Was there a memory that has been etched in your mind forever, like something that you go back to or you think about, whether you were a kid or you were saying like your first audition or that first moment or something that really sticks with you?
There are a few. I mean, there's a catch I made in a baseball game that I still remember. And I remember my dad had come to the game and he didn't make very many games. And I remember him writing a note on the refrigerator that said, nice catch. And I'll always remember that catch. I remember getting in my 76 Monte Carlo with rust all over it, with a boombox with 2 cassette tapes, and getting up one morning and just driving to California to be an actor. And I couldn't turn the car off because it wouldn't start again. So I drove for 48 hours, and I would pull over and sleep for an hour with the car running. And I remember that trip from Kentucky to Los Angeles, and I remember how exciting that was to say, well, I'm going to try something way out. And the joy I have in looking back after I was selling insurance door to door and working in a ladies' shoe shop and a men's suit shop and doing caricatures at a mall and the kind of things I had done. And suddenly I was like, I'm going to try a whole new vocation. And I remember that very well, is how exciting that was and how down on it my family was. My parents, certainly my dad was like, this is a bad idea. And there were a lot of people who were like, this is so dumb. And still doing it anyway. And that felt like that steel that you need later, you know. And so I have those memories a lot. I was a driver for my Aunt Rosemary when she was singing. She did a show called Four Girls Four, and she would open for Tony Bennett. And I remember there would be like the Billy May Orchestra, and we'd be in like Lake Tahoe or Reno, Nevada, and Margaret Whiting and Helen O'Connell and Kay Ballard and Kay Starr and all these old broads, and they were broads who would be singing, and I'd hold a tall glass of warm Smirnoff off the side of the stage, and they'd do the overture, and then I'd hand Helen O'Connell a big, tall, warm glass of vodka, and she'd down it, and they'd go out on stage and, Tangerine does a lady proud, and you go, she just drank a full bottle of vodka on her way out. And I remember all of those things because it was, to me, that was like the height of fame and excitement, and to be in a room where everybody was so thrilled to see him. And, you know, my aunt could be tough. I didn't really know her very well, you know. I was a Kentucky kid, so Rosemary had come to Kentucky maybe 3 or 4 times in my growing up, so I didn't really know her very well, but she was the famous aunt. And when I got there and got to know her, she was tough. You know, she was tough on me specifically, because she didn't want to be as tough on her kids. So I was the whipping boy for a while. And she'd be tough on me, and then we'd go to the Hollywood Bowl and she'd sing. And I remember watching her singing Tenderly or something, and I remember those moments where you fall in love with someone from their talent, from their pure talent, and what an elixir it is for all the other ills, in a way that Jay Kelly is, you know, where you're just going, oh, I get it, you know. And for the shortcomings that there's an awful lot of, you know, beauty too.
Thank you, George, for coming in. It's great to sit
It's
with
good to see
and
you.
you're
I'm so
phenomenal
happy
in
you're
this
doing this
film.
still. I think it must be fun. Do you enjoy it?
Yeah, I do. I mean, listen, I love movies. I love movies. I love actors. I love the craft. And when you love a movie like I do, Jay Kelly, and your performance in it is just so layered and great, and it sneaks up on you. And So yeah, I'm having a good time, George. It's good. It's
I'm
all
glad
good.
you're having a good time, because you should. It's a good gig you got.
Yeah, it's a good gig. Good
Thanks.
to see you.
It's good to see you.